Hi everyone, my name is Matthew. I'm a postdoc at the University of Michigan, and I'm excited to be talking to you today about work that I did with Lalejini and Charles Ofria looking at tag matching. So let's go ahead and define how tag matching can be used in genetic programming. This is useful in scenarios where you have an instruction that needs to decide among a set of possible operands to act upon. For example, which register to write into or which of available program modules to dispatch. Solve this problem by tagging the query, tagging the instruction, tagging the different operands, and using a tag matching procedure to compare the query tag to the different operands and select the best matching tagged operand to activate. And this tag matching metric is what's really driving the tag matching process. It is a function that takes in a query tag and an operands tag and determines whether they match closely or mismatch. There's been lots of different tag matching metrics that have been used in genetic programming work, and our interest here is in comparing them and understand how these tag matching metrics affect adaptive evolution. We looked at 5 metrics, which I'll overview here. You're probably the most familiar with the Hamming metric, where you look at the number of matching and mismatching bits in the tag representation, take the average, that gets you your affinity. A streak metric was proposed by Keith Downing as a more biologically inspired tag matching process, where you look for the longest set of contiguous matching bits and compare it to the length of the longest set of contiguously mismatching bits, and the ratio of those two streaks gets you the affinity. We also investigated integer metrics that have been used by Lee Spector and collaborators in PushGP. These metrics take the integer representation of a tag, map it onto the integer number line, and the proximity of these two integers gets you the affinity. We also looked at a variation of this metric, which specifically looks for how far above the query the operand is, only looking in one direction, which introduces kind of interesting asymmetries into the tag matching process. And finally, we introduced the hash metric as a kind of control. This metric takes two tags, runs them through a cryptographic hash, which spits out an arbitrary but deterministic match affinity. We compared these different tag metrics kind of at 3 different levels: geometric, variational, and evolutionary, which I'll briefly overview the headline results from now. The geometric analyses looked at how flexible these different tag matching metrics are in representing arbitrary connectivity patterns among tags. We found that the integer and based metrics were the most geometrically constrained. They had the hardest time representing different network configurations due to kind of everything getting mapped down to a one-dimensional space. Hamming metric was less constrained. The streak metric was less constrained still, due to different parts of the tag being able to completely independently be involved in different streaks. And finally, the hash metric was the most flexible, given that it has no geometric structure. Next, we looked at the effects of the tag matching metrics on mutation. We used bitwise mutation, performed mutational walks, and looked at the distribution of mutational effect sizes under the different metrics. We found that the hash metric, as you would expect, is the most mutationally sensitive because any bit flip completely scrambles all of the tag affinities. Integer metrics were slightly less mutationally sensitive, but they still have those high significance bits at the front, where if you flip them, it has a really big effect. Streak metric is more robust, less mutationally sensitive, but you can have individual bitwise mutations that disrupt streaks. And finally, the Hamming metric was the least mutationally sensitive because each mutation can only increase or decrease the number of matching bits by 1. Finally, at the highest level, we looked at the ability of these different metrics to facilitate adaptive evolution in systems with tag matching. Specifically, we looked at the signal GP event-driven genetic programming representation. Under this representation, you have a set of different tagged little program modules that are activated in response to tagged environmental signals, or they can activate each other through a tag-mediated process. First problem we looked at with signal GP is a changing signal task, a really simple task. You can think of it kind of like a telephone operator switchboard where we just have a set of defined signals and responses, and we're trying to get these programs to associate certain signals with certain responses. The Hamming and streak metrics solved this problem consistently. The integer metrics performed poorly, only solving it about half the time, and surprisingly, the hash metric was about in between the two, significantly better than the integer metrics, but worse than this Hamming and streak metric. Next, we looked at a slightly more complicated problem, the directional signal task. This problem requires the genetic program to be able to cycle through a set of different states, moving either forward through the cycle in response to environmental signals or backwards through the cycle. And this problem is known to require denser interaction networks among the modules in the signal GP program. Results were much the same, with the Hamming and streak metrics performing the best, integer metrics performing the worst, and the hash metric being in the middle. However, looking more closely at the Hamming and streak metrics, we were able to see that the streak metric was able to facilitate significantly faster adaptive evolution than the Hamming metric, reaching solutions in significantly fewer generations. So the headline takeaway here is that the Hamming and streak metrics are generally good choices, with the streak metric appearing to be stronger in some circumstances. The other thing to plug is that all the software used is open source and hopefully can facilitate applications of these methods in other projects. And lots of future work, we're particularly interested in understanding how these different tag matching metrics scale up under increasing numbers of queries and operands. So with that, I'll thank my collaborators and co-authors, and I'll stop and take questions. Thank you.